Hello and welcome to this episode of the Kings of Garbage Time Football podcast, where we help you sort through the garbage that is mainstream football analysis to become a better fantasy football general manager and a more knowledgeable football fan. And we're actually going to be getting to both of those today as we finally get some fantasy football content going on the podcast. I'm Zach Faria. I'm here with Colton Watson, Omar Rodriguez, and making his podcast debut, Joseph Beltran. Joseph, welcome to the podcast.
Oh,
All right. And so last week we got the big tests out of the way. We got all of our playoff picks in. So we'll be able to reference those back near the end of the season. This week we're going to talk about a few of the teams that did not get mentioned or really talked about as playoff teams. That's the losers. So we got the New York Jets, the Jacksonville Jaguars, the Houston Texans, the Denver Broncos, the Philadelphia Eagles, the Detroit Lions, and the Chicago Bears. So we're just going to jump right into which one of these teams could surprise everyone and be a playoff team. And Joseph, we'll just go right to you. Chicago Bears.
well, when you look at the Bears, and I don't know how long Andy Dalton's going to start, but I feel like it will be a couple weeks. But when Justin Fields takes over, that team I wouldn't be surprised if he goes to like a Herbert trajectory season. So I think they have a better offense than the Chargers did last year with Allen Robinson, David Montgomery leading the way, and Tariq Cohen, and then Cole Kmet, who will probably have a great second year. And the defense is still at like the top level of Khalil Mack leading the way. So I wouldn't be surprised if you see them jump into like the top of the North standings.
Omar, you're also in on the Bears as a team that could surprise people. So how about you jump in, add to what Joseph was just saying?
Yeah, gladly. So I also think that the defense is a big factor. Their defense really hasn't changed much. They're known to usually do good in their divisional games, and this year their division's looking like it's a little weaker, or at least like intentionally. I also really like Justin Fields. I think that he'll probably be starter by week 4. And I think I saw today on Twitter something about the coach Matt Nagy wanting to give David Montgomery close to like 20 touches a game this year. So that's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
No?
I'll get to that when we get to our sleepers in a bit. But yeah, just
all right.
We don't need to talk about
how
David
you feel
Montgomery.
about a certain somebody.
Yeah. Colton, Bears are one of the teams you have penciled in here.
Oh,
Anything
yeah.
you want to add there?
I have a couple teams, right? So Bears, as mentioned, you look at the team, we mentioned this last week in our last episode, and it's really just about the core around the QB, right? So Bears were bad because of Trubisky and Foles and all these guys coming in that weren't great, right? But the team structure is good. So when you're looking at a guy like Justin Fields, who's talented, it bodes well for the future. And it's not like unheard of for a rookie to come out firing out of the gate, right? You see Justin Herbert last year, and not that they're the same caliber of player, but Justin Fields is very talented and they're both named Justin. So, you know, that has, it plays into the favor there. And then for the Broncos, obviously another solid core team, just depending on Teddy Bridgewater or Drew Lock, whatever they decide to do there at QB and how they play. Both, I would say Teddy's probably a little bit better than Drew, but they're both pretty bad. But their team structure is good enough to where, you know, they could surprise people. Stacked defense, good offensive pieces. You know, it's just a QB that's holding them back. You got Javonte Williams there, who's another good RB along with Melvin Gordon. And then you got the Eagles, who I also have, and it's another talented team with Jalen Hurts at QB, who I'm actually high on. So out of those teams, I think QB-wise, I'm the highest on the Eagles with Jalen Hurts. So, yeah, good stuff. Looking forward to them and seeing how they do.
Well, how about I go ahead and make the case for one of the teams you just mentioned, the Denver Broncos. And let me know if I convince you guys on this, but I think everyone is a little too hard on Drew Lock. So let me walk everyone through it. Drew Lock's 24 years old, right? He'll be 25 in December, I believe it is. He's going into his third season in the NFL. He only has 18 career starts. So he only has one season worth of starts under his belt. His rookie year, he came in at the end of the year, threw for 1,000 yards in 5 games, and with 7 touchdowns to 3 interceptions, and went into 2020 offseason with all this hype, and the pandemic hit. So he's got this first full offseason where he's going to be the starter in Denver, and he's dealing with all this mess of players not being able to go to voluntary workouts and all of this. And he comes out the start of last season very flat. First 7 games, 7 touchdowns to 10 interceptions. Over the last 6 games, 9 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. His yards per attempt went up. His completion percentage went up. And the Broncos did better over those last 6 games than the first 7. I think that Drew Lock finally has a real offseason under his belt as the starting quarterback for the Denver Broncos. He's obviously very talented. The big problem for him is turnovers, but this team is loaded at almost every other position. I really think that everyone just needs to take a breath. I know everyone wants the Broncos to pull up Aaron Rodgers and make it a 4-horse race in the AFC West, but I think Drew Lock is really talented, and this is the year that he's finally going to be able to show that on the field with more consistent play. Am I crazy? Anybody?
It's a little crazy, but oh, sorry. If you want to go ahead.
No, you're fine. Go ahead and say.
Okay, I was about to say it's a little crazy, just because Drew Lock is garbage, but it is the fact that, like, I think part of why I had the Broncos on my list as teams that could surprise is, like you're mentioning a little bit, they have everything but QB. And it's not, we saw it before with like Joe Flacco and like the Ravens. Not that the Broncos defense is that good, and not that Locke is even close to Joe Flacco in his prime, but it's not unheard of for a QB to have a magnificent, season, even though they're generally trash. I mean, you look at Nick Foles, what he did with the Eagles in the playoffs, like unheard of. So I definitely could see it happening. Whether for me, it doesn't really matter though if it's Drew Lock or Teddy Bridgewater leading them though.
Yeah, and I just want to add also, I think I would agree with Colton there. I'm kind of with you. I'm not like Colton where I hate Drew Lock, but I also don't love him.
I don't
really
hate
think
him.
that
He's trash.
Well, I just think that, like you're saying, he has every offensive weapon he could use now. I mean, he's got 2 solid looking running backs. He's got good wide receiver core. If he or Bridgewater really can't do much with that offense, then I'm thinking, they'd go for the tank and just get a quarterback this upcoming year. They take Rattler and, they try to build something with that.
Well, let's throw Teddy Bridgewater out because he's a mediocre backup quarterback. They're not going anywhere.
You just have bias, okay?
I absolutely do have bias on this question. You're correct. But I really think Drew Lock is going to have a full, real offseason under his belt. He only has 18 career starts. I think this is the year he finally puts it all together. I think last year threw it off for a number of players, and I don't think there's any quarterback that suffered more from having a pandemic screwed offseason than Drew Lock did. Going into last season, he only had 5 career starts.
I was going to say, and granted, he did look good the year before. I remember specifically for Dynasty and Fantasy, people were very high on him coming into 2020. And, the offense obviously is great. So if he can put it together, then I could see definitely what you're saying. I just don't know how much merit it has.
I'll take that. I'll take that as a win after my unconvincing case for the Raiders last week. So
that's right. Nothing you say will ever convince me.
All right, so let's flip it to the opposite end of the spectrum. Well, we know that if Deshaun Watson does not play this year, the Houston Texans are probably the worst team in football. They are bad at almost every position, and it doesn't seem likely that Deshaun is going to play most of, if not the entire year. So we're going to go ahead and see which team do we think is most likely to end up with the number 1 overall pick besides the Houston Texans. Which team could be worse than the Houston Texans next year? And after Colton and I made the case for the Broncos here, we're going to jump to Omar, who's going to make the case for the Broncos as one of the worst teams in the league.
Yeah, so definitely, like we just brought all those points, they're a solid looking team, but like I think you mentioned, it's if they had a good quarterback, it would be a 4-horse race in that division. All the other 3 teams in that division look like they could be playoff teams. So even if their season is all right, they have to play those three teams twice, and that already seems like a tough schedule to me. And so for them to just kind of go off of that, I'm pretty sure they're going to end off in at least the bottom three this year.
All right, and another team that Colton just brought up as a team that could have a surprisingly good year is another team that Joseph thinks could be worse than the Houston Texans, the Philadelphia Eagles. Joseph, is this just because you're a Cowboys fan, or
that's another bias right there? I'm literally calling it right now.
I just don't know about Jalen Hurts. It's a point where I don't know about the wide receivers. They have DeVonta Smith and Jalen Reagor, and then they have Dallas Goedert, and then they have the ghost of Zach Ertz. It's like, did they give him enough to where he'll be able to succeed there, other than just being a rushing QB?
I mean, they felt confident enough to let Wentz go, right? I mean, granted, I think they're going to end up with the first, which is mind-blowing, but obviously he's good enough to where Wentz, who was their franchise guy, is gone now, and they didn't get a guy like Stafford, which the Rams did to get rid of Goff, right? So it'd be like if the Rams put faith in Wolford, kind of. I know
not for lack of trying. Apparently, the Philadelphia Eagles were. Yeah, it sounded like they were not sold on Jalen Hurts early in the offseason.
I don't know if that was fugazi or, what was happening with that, but there was some reports. But like the offseason, we see a lot of crazy stuff come out that doesn't ever come to fruition. So we don't know, but their front office is garbage pile. So maybe.
I would also add, though, that I don't think there's any way they could jump into that top category or top group for this year's draft. So having the year where Hurts, and then they can see what happens, and then getting a top QB in next year, or I guess this year's now. But I just don't know if I see his passing ability. Like Lamar, we saw the jump where he just went full on throwing, and we saw the Ravens kind of throw it back. I just don't see them doing that. And you're giving Hurts a worse team overall.
Dude, Joseph, he threw an 80-yard touchdown to Deshaun Jackson. I was like, Deshaun Jackson's only play on the year, bro. 80-yard touchdown. Like, what trash QB throws an 80-yard touchdown besides maybe Drew Lock like his first year?
So
well, that's because Derek Carr is an elite quarterback.
Derek
obviously.
Carr, I don't know about elite, but he's definitely good. He's underrated for sure, honestly.
I mean, those plays also are wide receiver getting behind the secondary.
Yeah, but the QB still has to make the throw. You know how many overthrows Daniel Jones had last year? I literally saw like 4 in one game, but then PFF tells me he's the best deep thrower. It doesn't make sense, dude. I remember seeing that. I think Zachary posted that. Daniel Jones the best deep thrower. Like, I don't know.
That's another thing that's going to come up when we get to our sleeper picks in a bit. But Colton, on this question, you say the more things change, the more they stay the same. The Jets or the Jaguars are back in the running for the number 1 overall pick.
That's right. And I try not to do too many hot takes. I'm leaving that for the next category. But it just is to the point where like the Jets are still, I mean, until they prove something, we got to assume they're trash, right? Like we can't just like put them over even the Patriots, like I wouldn't put them over any team in that division. Dolphins, Patriots, or Bills, obviously. And then so if they're not winning their divisional games, like are they going to win games against other talented divisions? Maybe. I mean, maybe not. It just depends on how fast Zach Wilson takes to the offense, right? And then on the other side, you got Trevor Lawrence, who obviously we're all high on, but at the same time, he's still a rookie and the team wasn't good when he's coming in, just like the Jets. So it's not that I hate Wilson. It's not that I hate Lawrence. It's literally just because as mentioned, I know this is like a common theme. It just depends on the core of the team. And I know the Jets and the Jags have made steps to improve their team on both sides of the ball, but it just remains to be seen that they'll be able to not be trash,
Totally fair. I almost put the Jets for this question too, but I was actually surprised that no one else went with the Detroit Lions on this. And it's not because I hate Jared Goff. I think Jared Goff is a decent quarterback. I think the Rams did what they had to do. They can't wait for a quarterback to become more than decent. They need to win now. But I think Goff is decent. I think this offense, the running game looks great with Jamal Williams and DeAndre Swift. That should be fun. The offensive line looks fine. The wide receivers don't impress me unless Hawkinson takes a step into the tight end, the top 3 tight ends, and makes it a top 4. I don't really see this team having an alpha receiver anywhere. But this defense last year was arguably one of the worst. It was arguably the worst in football last year. They were tied for last in yards per play. They were 31st in turnovers forced behind the Houston Texans, and they were last in points allowed. I don't think that they're going to dramatically improve from that. And this offense just does not strike me as being enough to make up for that. I'm not overwhelmed by any part of this offense to think they can make up for a defense that's that bad. It's not a question of Jared Goff, in my opinion. It's just this defense is going to be so bad that unless Jared Goff goes full Matthew Stafford and keeps them afloat for a bit and gets them back to the 6th or 7th overall pick, I think he's basically playing out a season before the Lions bring in someone else, because they're going to be picking in the top 3.
Yeah, and there was talk before, well, mainly from me, but there was talk before the draft that they might even draft a QB, and they could have, right? So I don't know if they're tanking for the next QB or I think they actually kind of believe in Goff. So yeah, that's the reason kind of why I didn't put them as, like a bottom feeder team. I want to believe in him a little. I know what his ceiling looks like. Obviously his floor is garbage, but his ceiling's good. And yeah, I don't know. I don't know if they'll be the worst team, but obviously they're going to be somewhere in the top 8 pick range at best, in my opinion.
I think even if Jared Goff plays fine, I just don't see how he's going to keep that defense afloat for a whole season.
He can't win you games, right? So that's the thing that you're probably harping on, is that he's not good enough to win games. He's good enough to not lose them. So it's going to be interesting to see how they actually perform. And I obviously, as a Rams fan, I'll be looking at some of their games and seeing how well Goff does and how bad he does, right? So we'll see.
Yes, we will. And how about finally, for the first time for an extended period, we get some fantasy football here on the podcast. So sticking with the theme of these loser teams, which of these losers do you think is going to be most interesting for fantasy football? And we'll start with Joseph here, because it's a team we've talked about in both segments so far, the Denver Broncos.
Well, I felt like this is kind of like an easy pick to go with. When you have 2 like star wide receivers, and I don't know which running back's going to win out, either Javonte or Gordon, which I think will be Javonte as the season goes along. Then you have Noah Fant. That I just don't see how you don't like kind of try to build off that offense. Like, people don't believe in Locke, so those players are going to go for less than what they're probably worth. Like, if you look at Judy's tape from last year, he was an absolute monster, and you could see him jump into like that top 12 category. So it's just like the defense is good, so keep them in games where they might run or pass, but I just don't see how you can fade this offense.
And they have one of the most sure-handed receivers in the NFL, Omar. They have Tim Patrick. How about that?
No, that's definitely right. I think he's definitely underrated. There's a reason I picked him up a long time ago, before all these PFF stats were all over Twitter and stuff.
He's garbage, bro. You got to give it up to baby Megatron, Cortland Sutton, dude. Even though I traded him away, but
I have some of his shares too.
I do think this is one of the more interesting wide receiver trios in the NFL, not of the caliber of the Cowboys or the Bengals that we talked about last week.
Or Steelers,
still very interesting, or the Steelers. Yes. How about Colton? You and Omar are both on the same team for fantasy football reasons this year, the Jacksonville Jaguars.
I feel like I've been blabbling a lot, so I'll let Omar take this one, and then I'll kind of add in if he misses points that I'm going to cover.
Take it away, Omar.
Yeah, definitely. I just think they seem like just like an interesting team to watch this year, because they're basically like a brand new team, brand new coach, so who knows what they're going to do. There's a bunch of random speculation all over the place. They're going to use ETN as a wide receiver, then they're going to use him as the 3 down back, or they're going to use him as a 3rd down back. So we don't know what's going to happen. I saw some article or something that said that James Robinson is going to be the hammer or something of the office. I think everybody is kind of just needs to calm down for a little bit and just remember, football's not too far away. I think we can wait I also think it'll be crazy to think that, there's a chance that somewhere along the season we're going to see trades for like Tim Tebow happen. If there's a chance he might do something, with that tight end role, like we don't know what he's going to do. And then I think they have a pretty like underrated wide receiver core. They have DJ Chark, they have Laviska Shenault, who's apparently got probably like the most hype I've heard of like all of practice from the last few months now. And then they also have Marvin Jones now, which a lot of people forget. He's got like a crazy high ceiling, like, and he's had it consistently. If there's anything else I missed, Colton, go ahead.
You forgot the undrafted wide receiver they got. I don't remember his name either because I dropped him in fantasy like 2 months ago. But
is it Josh Matter-Baby or is it the other one?
No, I remember now. Colin Johnson.
There you
think.
go.
Oh, I do remember Colin Johnson.
That's another
from last year, right?
Yeah, that's another baby Megatron. So not just because I owned him at one point, but yeah. So there's that. And did you mention Trevor Lawrence? Because
I didn't mention Trevor Lawrence, but I feel like
how do you not
been
mention Trevor
talked about for like the last year,
Yeah, but
because we all know he's going to be just a good quarterback, regardless.
Yeah, I interpreted this list and I picked the Jags because fantasy interest, right? So not necessarily that I think they're the best fantasy, they generate the best fantasy players this year out of these teams. Obviously, Joseph mentioned the Broncos, who are a good choice, but they're the most interesting to me, right? So I obviously own a share of Lawrence myself, and I am just, let's see what he does, right? So he's supposed to be this like generational prospect like Andrew Luck and stuff. So we'll see how he does. Then you got James Robinson, obviously really good last year, one of the best undrafted seasons for a running back. And then they just replaced him with the first round pick, which is a little weird, but also exciting at the same time because I also don't own James Robinson, so I don't care what happens to him. But we'll see what Etienne does, right? Etienne's another talented back, and he's paired up with Lawrence again. So there's obviously that connection there. So that's exciting to see. And then Omar mentioned the receivers with a Shenault and Chark, and it's at the point where we don't know who the one's going to be, right? There's been a lot of hype about Shenault this offseason. So it'd be interesting to see who Lawrence connects with the most. And then you also throw, like Omar said, Marvin Jones in the mix and maybe some occasional sightings from Colin Johnson, and you got a really interesting offense, right? So yeah, it's definitely my choice and Omar's choice, and it's a good one.
And I am on the Philadelphia Eagles because there's the core four players of this offense are just so interesting to me. You have Jalen Hurts, who's a potential QB1 this year. He's projected in our sleeper league to be QB8. You have Dallas Goedert, who's projected to be tight end 8. I think he finishes top 6 tight ends. You have Miles Sanders, who is currently projected as RB20, but Nick Sirianni, the head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles now, comes from the Indianapolis Colts. He was their offensive coordinator when their running game just exploded. So I really want to see what Miles Sanders is going to do in this backfield. And then, truth be told, I understand all the Ja'Marr Chase hype. I'm not saying Ja'Marr Chase is not the better pick long-term, but I really think Devontae Smith is going to be the best rookie wide receiver for this season.
The Slim Reaper, baby.
I just think he's that good. I'm not worried about Jalen Reagor eating into his targets at all. I think you see Devontae Smith and Dallas Goedert getting the lion's share of fantasy production from that team.
Wait, did you say the best rookie wide receiver?
I think this year, Devontae Smith finishes as rookie wide receiver 1.
Yeah, I just can't agree with that. Obviously Ja'Marr Chase, and we're actually forgetting the wide receiver 1 of this class, Kyle Pitts. So he's definitely got a lot of competition. So I don't know if he can live up to that, especially on a run heavy team like the Eagles. And he's skinny, so.
Wow.
All right. Well, we're getting, I just got the 10-minute warning from Zoom here that we're reaching our 40 minutes. So we might have to hop back on in a bit. But now we're to one of the more interesting segments I think we're going to do, which is our sleepers. So we're going to hit our sleepers at running back, wide receiver, and tight end. And we're going to start, who's the most interesting one here? Let's start with let's bring it back to the Broncos again, Omar. Let's go with your pick, Javonte Williams, as a sleeper at running back.
Yeah, so this might be a little easier for me because I've had a lot of like the Javonte Williams hype, I guess, for the last few months now. I traded, as you guys all know, in our home league, uh, Chris Carson and a first round pick to move up just to get him. Uh, and I think it's probably one of the better moves I made for my team there because I think he's going to be a running back that we talk about for at least the next, 5, 6 years. He's definitely got what it takes. He's got the talent. I've seen his tapes. Like he's got that. Like I think he's got what it takes to be like a mini Derrick Henry. He's just an animal when he runs, and I'm excited to see him this year. I don't think he'll steal, let's say, the running back, the lead back position from Melvin Gordon early. I think it'll become more of a split back thing. And then, next year is really when we're going to see him really just explode and evolve into that running back one after Melvin Gordon leaves.
And then let's go ahead and get to another rookie running back in a split backfield. One of my favorite running backs in this past class, Joseph, you have your prized possession, Trey Sermon.
Yeah, I just don't see how you don't look at him and to see like a top 12 back eventually. Like, I don't believe in Mostert or any of the running backs long term. I don't know if it's going to be the end of this year or the start of next year, but I just think if you have a chance to get Trey Sermon, you have to do it. His current dynasty ADP is in the 6th and 7th round, and his redraft is the 10th. And I just really like both of those, especially in redraft. If you can hit like 3 RBs early and then go wide receivers and then whatever in the middle, and he's like your RB4, I just think you have to take that chance because we see the 49ers run the ball and they're going to run it a lot. I even if Mostert is around, I wouldn't be surprised if they each are around 800 yards and like 7 TDs. And I just think as a 10th round ADP and redraft, that's just a steal.
Absolutely. I believe I got Trey Sermon in the 6th round of our startup Dynasty Superflex this year, 6th or 7th, I believe.
Yeah, and I was going to pick him at the next pick too.
So. And it was 100% worth it, especially when I was able to get Raheem Mostert even later. So I'm all in on that Niners backfield this year. Colton, you and I have a running back of sort of complete opposite play styles. So why don't you take it away with your guy, Gus Edwards?
So, yeah, Gus Edwards, I just want to preface this by saying I felt like I was one of the only ones who did actual sleepers. Am I muted?
No, you're good.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I feel like I was one of the only ones that did actual sleepers. But besides Gus Edwards, my next few are a little spicy, but Gus Edwards is definitely just a guy that's kind of overlooked, right? He does his job and he does his job well. He always has multiple 100 rushing yards, rushing TDs. He's on a rushing offense. He's trusted. They liked him enough to give him a contract. So he's definitely a guy that you like to see and a guy you can get cheap. So if you want a reliable guy that can consistently get your yards and touchdowns and be that kind of, I don't know, he'd be like your RB5, maybe RB4 at worst. So yeah, definitely pick him up and he'll do wonders for you.
And then I am on a guy who I do consider to be a bit of a sleeper because I am surprised at how many people are down on him right now. Instead of a big, bulky back like Gus Edwards, who's going to get you those goal line touches and get a lot of carries, I'm on my favorite kind of running back, PPR guys, Tariq Cohen, who right now in sleeper dynasty ADP is RB52 at age 25. He's projected by sleeper to be RB49 last year, and I think that's insane because his past 3 seasons, he finishes RB29, RB12, and then RB27. This Bears offense is obviously better when Tariq Cohen is in. He's the most dynamic player on that offense. He's the most explosive. The best year they had was the year he finished RB12. That was the year I believe they went to the playoffs that year as well. That was the year Trubisky looked like a pretty decent quarterback who could take that next step. He signed a 3-year, $17 million extension last September, right before he tore his ACL. To me, there's only 2 reasons I think it's excusable to pass on Tariq Cohen. One is if you're someone that gets squeamish about ACL tears. I completely understand that. The second is if you just don't believe Matt Nagy knows what he's doing. And I'm honestly a little worried about that. Omar cited that he just came out and said he wants to give David Montgomery 20 carries a game. That seems a little questionable, especially with as good as Tariq Cohen is. Montgomery finished 4th in carries last year because once Cohen went down, there was no other running back in that backfield. I really don't see him replicating that kind of finish. And Tariq Cohen is going to come in. He's going to get his pass catching role back. I have a lot more faith in Andy Dalton and Justin Fields than I do in Mitch Trubisky to be able to make use of a guy with the playmaking ability of Tariq Cohen. Relying on Matt Nagy might be the death of me, but I'm all in on Mighty Might. All right, and we're back, and we're jumping right to our wide receivers. Now, there's a really funny thing that happened here. If I told you that 2 of us here picked Raiders wide receivers, you would be forgiven if you thought it was me, the biggest Derek Carr booster in our group, and Omar, the actual Las Vegas Raiders fan. But it is actually Colton and the biggest promoter of Derek Carr haterade on the planet, Joseph, who both picked Raiders wide receivers. So let's go with the one that was selected first out of the 2 of them. Joseph, Henry Ruggs is your sleeper at wide receiver.
I believe teams don't like looking bad. And when the Raiders chose Ruggs, they chose him as top wide receiver in that class before Lamb, Judy, and Jefferson. And I just think that they're going to game plan for him better this year. I don't think anyone saw what Nelson Aguilar was going to do last year. And when that happened, he was the clear number 1. And with him gone, it's just Bryan Edwards, and they brought in John Brown. But I just can see Ruggs taking over this team. And I wouldn't be surprised if he finishes like as a 1,000-yard wide receiver, like 8 touchdowns.
Because Derek Carr is such an elite quarterback that he's going to get him the ball. I completely understand, Joseph.
Oh, he has to throw to someone, and even like average QBs will get over 3,000 yards.
I'll get to that in a second, Joseph. I'll get to who we can.
All right.
Yeah, I want to share something too after Colton gets his point across too.
Wait, no, what were you gonna share?
No, it kind of involves both of them, so I'd rather wait for you to say what you want to say.
No, that's fair.
So let's go ahead and get to Colton, because Colton has the other second-year wide receiver on the Raiders, Bryan Edwards, out of South Carolina.
Yep. And like I kind of mentioned earlier when I first spoke about my first sleeper, these guys are sleepers, right? So you don't expect them to be good. And if they're not good, I can just spat off a bunch of hot takes. And if they're bad, I'll just ignore it, right? So I don't care, right? So I have Bryan Edwards, and he is a guy that can be a huge playmaker, right? So let me go ahead and for myself, pull up his player profiler. And if you look at his stats on player profiler, he is a monster. You have a breakout age of 17.8. So he literally broke out at 17 years old in college. He had a college dominator of almost 50%, 48.4%. And he has the alpha body, right? He has the size comparable is Corey Davis as far as size and measurements and all of that. And he definitely has the body to be an alpha. And he didn't look bad in his limited reps. Obviously, he was dealing with a lot of injuries throughout the season. I believe he was sidelined from like week 2 to week 9 or something. So he officially, if you look at his stats on online, he has only really started 3 games. So he definitely had an injury-riddled season, somewhat similarly to Ruggs, but he has a skill set, unlike Ruggs, to actually be an every down guy who doesn't need to be manufactured touches, right? This guy can be their go-to. I know they got John Brown, so it's going to be interesting to see how they kind of work in John Brown and Bryan Edwards and Renfro and Ruggs, and then keep Waller fed. It will definitely be interesting, but unlike Joseph, I'm not a Carr hater. To me, he is a good QB, right? So I think it'll be fine as far as them getting the targets and getting the right perfect balls to make plays, but it just depends on if he can actually do it. And I think given a healthy full season and opportunity, he can be good, right? This guy isn't garbage. This guy is actually has a lot of potential. And at times in college looked better than his previous teammate, Deebo Samuel. And we know how good Deebo Samuel is in the NFL. So I'm very hopeful for him, to say the least.
Very crazy that South Carolina, which is the rival to my alma mater, Clemson, had so many good players like Deebo Samuel, Brian Edwards, Shi Smith, J.C. Horn on defense, and just couldn't touch Clemson. So I just want to throw that out there, just in case anyone was wondering. Omar, you had something to add on those two?
Yeah, so as far as what I've been seeing is I've been seeing that the Raiders have been doing a lot of like off-season workouts involving their rookies and their second years. And I think that they're definitely all looking to show, I guess, what they've got this year. They have good competition in their division, and it's honestly going to be really exciting to see both of these second-year wide receivers play. I think they both have the talent to be able to be the alpha wide receiver. It's just a matter of who wants it more because, you know, John Brown, very consistent wide receiver, but I think he's just going to be there as their wide receiver too. I think he'll have the wide receiver two role for sure, but I think that one of these two is going to break out and have the alpha role regardless. I think it's gonna be cool though. I'm really glad to see that you guys also see it though, because I have a few of their shares and that makes me a little excited.
Well, here's a fun fact is before I went with the receiver that I'm about to talk about, I had John Brown penciled in as my sleeper. So we could have been in a situation where three of us were pitching different Raiders wide receivers to Omar, the Raiders fan. So
nice.
But he would have loved that.
Oh yeah. Well, my guy, I ultimately went with another guy that I own, Darius Slayton, and I was surprised when I started doing research. I believe the first two reports, one of them was Rotoballer and one of them was CBS Sports that I read, said that Darius Slayton is a guy you shouldn't even draft this year, and I was floored. He's currently going in Dynasty Sleeper ADP at wide receiver 75 in Dynasty, which is behind Jamison Crowder, Cole Beasley, T.Y. Hilton, and then young guys, Dwayne Eskridge, Russell Gage, Paris Campbell, Nico Collins. Darius Slayton did not have the spectacular breakout year last year that we all expected. He had 96 targets. Evan Ingram had 109. Sterling Shepard had 90. Obviously, there's going to be a problem now that Kenny Golladay is thrown in the mix. But the way I see it is Darius Slayton was playing as the Giants wide receiver one last year. He was going up against the best corner that each team had to offer, and he couldn't hack it. He's not a wide receiver one for an NFL team. But this year, he's not going to be the Giants wide receiver one. That's going to be Kenny Golladay. And now you're going to have a situation where Slayton's going to be able to take the top off of defenses more. Colton mentioned that Next Gen Stats had Daniel Jones graded as the best deep ball passer last year.
I don't know how, but yeah.
Well, what I found interesting was that he only took 39 deep shots last year, according to Next Gen Stats. And Darius Slayton was really the only burner on that roster, and he was getting bottled up by the number one corner on every team. Now that Kenny Galladay's there, I think you're going to be able to get Darius Slayton in one-on-one situations. He's going to be able to go deep. Daniel Jones is going to be able to throw that deep ball more often. And Darius Slayton is going to have a nice year. He's not going to blow you away. He's not going to be a wide receiver one in fantasy football. But at ADP 75 among wide receivers for a guy who is going to be the deep threat in this offense, I think is a little crazy. I think you got to take a chance on Darius Slayton going into this year at the value. It's incredible value. Omar, speaking of value, you went with a guy who I was considering for a while as my sleeper. You went with Gabriel Davis.
Yeah, so actually I know that Joseph also, like, when I got him from him in our home league, he was also kind of sad to let him go because I'm sure we all know Josh Allen is a talented quarterback. And besides Stephon Diggs, that offense really doesn't have like any talented wide receivers, or let alone they don't even have, I guess, a tight end who I would consider is even like a lead tight end in that offense. Which I think it was a couple weeks back, there was rumors about Zach Ertz maybe making some sort of deal with them, but that just like went, I don't know, just ended out of nowhere. But I think we all know. I think, did you guys see that stat? Gabriel Davis led rookie wide receivers last year with most deep targets. So it looks like Josh Allen isn't afraid to, throw the ball deep down there to him. And he's got Stephon Diggs, he throws deep down to him also. So, it's awesome to see that Josh Allen, besides like his run game, like he's not afraid to throw deep down there. And I think we're going to be seeing a lot of that again this next year. They picked up Emmanuel Sanders, who I think is probably a lesser John Brown. So I think Gabriel Davis doesn't have much competition for that wide receiver 2 role.
I just want to correct you. Cole Beasley's still there, right?
Yes.
He's pretty good.
Right.
He's like a budget Cooper Kupp, I think he had 1,000 yards last year, but that kind of goes to your point, right? I mean, Cole Beasley, he's been a solid NFL contributor as like a wide receiver 3, but he had 1,000 yards last year with Josh Allen, So if Gabriel Davis is as good as, we think he'll be, him with Josh Allen, I mean, definitely in a space where he could get 1,000 yards, right? And multiple TDs, just depending on, if he breaks out or not. But
and I saw like over the last like 7 games of the season last year, he had over like 95% of touches in the offense. So, that goes to show they want to involve him too.
And Cole Beasley definitely also has a different role than a Gabriel Davis would. So
yeah, they don't really.
They'll be complementary more than competitive.
Yeah, it's not definitely like a direct. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're going to get to the tight ends here. And I actually think we're just going to jump into mine since we mentioned Emmanuel Sanders, because my tight end is a guy who benefits from Sanders leaving, is Adam Troutman. So let's go through the targets from last year. Alvin Kamara had 107. Michael Thomas obviously was hurt for a lot of the year. He ended up with 55. Traquan Smith had 50. And then Emmanuel Sanders and Jared Cook leave behind 142 targets. And that was a year that saw Taysom Hill start quite a few games. Drew Brees' arm wasn't what it was. I think Jameis Winston wins the starting job. And if Jameis Winston wins the starting job, Adam Troutman shoots up the board. He's tight end 19 right now in Dynasty ADP on Sleeper. He's projected to finish as tight end 25, which I think is incredibly low. For some perspective, Jameis Winston in 2019 with Cameron Brate and OJ Howard, their combined stats, 108 targets, 70 receptions, 770 yards, 5 touchdowns. That stat line in 2019 would have been tight end 7. Last year, it would have been tight end 3. I think Adam Troutman's value skyrockets if Jameis Winston ends up being the starter, because Adam Troutman just doesn't come off the field. He's already one of the best run blocking tight ends in the league. They're going to leave him out there for most of the game. There isn't another tight end behind him that is threatening to take away snaps. He's probably already the 3rd receiving target on that team. And one of them is Michael Thomas. The other one's the running back, Alvin Kamara. So I think you get a lot of value. You probably should have drafted Adam Troutman last year in your rookie drafts. I did that. I'm patting myself on the back prematurely, but I think it's going to pay off this upcoming season. So who has the next most interesting one on here? Let's go with another tight end who might see a boost from a new quarterback. Tyler Higbee of the Los Angeles Rams. Omar, that's your pick. Go for it.
Yeah, so Tyler Higbee, definitely a tight end who in the past we've seen play fairly well. He hasn't, put up crazy numbers, but we've seen some of his ceiling go, pretty well in some games in the past. And that was with Jared Goff, who isn't a bad quarterback, but now they have Matthew Stafford, who is definitely, like you said, a boost at the quarterback. And we're going to see everybody in the offense, I think, get that boost. Tyler Higbee also benefiting from Gerald Everett, who was a solid tight end, leaving now. I don't think besides that rookie, they have any other tight ends in their room. That even though I guess Jacob Harris does look like he's a solid tight end like prospect, I think Tyler Higbee is good enough to keep his job and at least play uh, a redraft level, like maybe tight end. I would say top. I think he can go up to top 10 with Matthew Stafford this year in redraft.
Colton,
And I was going to add on to that. Obviously, as a Rams fan, I've been following the situation closely.
That's why I was going to pass it off for you. So
yeah.
Go ahead, take it away.
So yeah, definitely. We saw what Stafford did with Hawkinson. So I think that kind of drives Omar's point, right? That Jared Goff is decent, but he hasn't really been a huge feeder of tight ends. And Matthew Stafford with Hawkinson has been very good, right? So obviously Higbee isn't on the same level as Hawkinson per se, but we saw what Higbee did at the end of 2019. Omar was talking about ceiling, how we've seen it. He had, at the end of 2019, he had 4 games of 100 receiving yards in a row. I think that was a record maybe for the Rams. It was some record. But then he ended that streak with 84 yards. So he had basically 5 games of 80 plus yards and 4 of those being over 100. So yeah, definitely. He's definitely a sleeper, but definitely someone to look out for, right? So definitely excited to see what he can do without Everett.
And the perfect transition. Speaking of Gerald Everett, Gerald Everett's now on the Seattle Seahawks. They don't have a third wide receiver as of yet. Make the case for Gerald Everett as that guy.
I think if you miss on the top 4 tight ends, like you shouldn't draft any. You should just wait. Like the gap between those middle group people there's just nothing. So when you look at Everett, the Seahawks signed him for $6 million. You don't pay a guy that just to sit there. And we've seen these past couple of years, Seahawks tight ends do good for a couple of weeks, and then they get replaced and someone else does good. And with him going around pick 180, I just think that's a steal. When you see the Seahawks with Metcalf and Lockett and Eskridge, I just see how you can put Everett in that middle area, and he would just take off. Because we've seen him on the Rams when Higbee's been hurt. You'll see him have those weeks. He's clearly athletic. Like you can compare him to Jonnu Smith when it comes to his receiving skills. And I would say that if you miss on the top 4 guys, he's got to be your target.
And I would assume by the top 4 guys, you mean George Kittle, Darren Waller, Travis Kelce, and Adam Troutman. Do I have that correct?
No, his 4th is Kyle Pitts, the guard.
It's worth a try.
Wait, who's actually your 4th?
Pitts.
Oh, yeah. So
Hawkinson's your 5th, though, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Adam Troutman rounds out the top 6.
Hawkinson with Goff over Andrews? I don't know. I don't know about that, but
yeah,
that's for another show.
All right. And Colton, you have, I would say this is the most interesting pick out of all of them here. The Dallas Cowboys have 3 established wide receivers. They have 2 tight ends who have not established which one is going to be the starter. Blake Jarwin, Dalton Schultz. You picked one of those 2 tight ends. So which one was it?
Dalton Schultz, who you can basically get for free. I mean, actually get for free. I think even we just did a few months ago, we did a tight end premium league, 2 points per reception. And I basically got him like one of the last rounds, like I think 32 rounds. I got him like round 26, 27. So, and I probably could have just waited and got him off the wire. Honestly, I don't think anyone was targeting him. So if I'm getting him at that point in a boosted tight end league, you're getting him off the waivers, right? So already you have 0 cost there, and he doesn't cost anything, right? And that's the main part of a sleeper. You want them to be lottery tickets, and this guy is actually a lot better than just a lottery ticket. I mean, we saw what he did last year. Jarwin, tore his ACL. He had some season-ending injury, like first week, and we saw what Schultz did, and Schultz was good, right? I mean, if you look at his stats last year, he had 600 yards, 4 TDs, and the main thing that I want to point out is that he was rotating QBs constantly. So there's no Dak Prescott there. If you had Prescott for the whole year with Jarwin out, I don't even know what his stats would be at this point. I think he'd be pushing close to 800 yards, maybe even double-digit TDs if he's lucky there. And Jarwin is a guy who doesn't excite me, right? The competition isn't strong from him. The Cowboys gave him a contract. That's like the main thing people point out. Well, he's got the contract. Well, the contract is literally speculative. He did nothing. His best season in the league is 300 yards. So they gave him a contract just speculatively. And obviously there's a lot of huge risks there. And so they're tied to him by money, but they're not tied to him by his play. And that's one of the main things for me. Like, is a team really going to sit by if another guy's better and just be like, well, this guy has a bigger contract, so we're just going to play him? And maybe they do that, and maybe he doesn't pan out. But I think talent-wise, he's better than Jarwin. He's obviously proven that he can have a productive tight end season, and he's free. So why not just take a shot at him and see what happens?
And I will say, it looks like from latest reports that Jarwin might be a bit behind schedule on his rehab.
Yep. So that's definitely another thing, right? He might not come back the same player, and he already was kind of trash to begin with. So we'll see what happens, right? So I'm going to hold my shares, and we'll see.
Joseph, does that make sense to you as the resident Cowboys fan?
Yeah, I would think so. If I had to pick two, it had to be Dalton. Like, we see when Dak and the offense is going that the tight end is going to be involved. And as annoying that would be to like CeeDee Lamb or Cooper or Gallup owners, that we're going to have the tight end involved in whatever we do, especially in like that goal line area. So, yeah, if I had to pick one, it had to be Dalton.
That actually surprised me too. But I'm not really worried about the other guys, right? We saw the hype. If the Cowboys picked Pitts, people's heads were going to explode. So obviously people aren't too concerned about them all getting the ball because Cowboys defense is trash. So Dak will be putting up like 5K yards. So I'm not really worried about who gets the rest of the 1,000, split between the other guys.
Yep. They'll be putting up 5,000 yards as they chase Daniel Jones and the Giants at the top of the division while he's throwing 12 touchdowns to Darius Slayton next year.
No, that's certainly possible in another reality, right? So we'll see.
That's the reality I want to live in. So another successful episode in the books. Joseph making his debut. Hopefully we can rotate in Hunter Garcia and Simon McGulpin, two of the other members of our team here, who Hunter also made picks for last week's episode. Joseph made picks for last week's episode. We're going to keep track of those. Interesting one he had is the Vikings winning the NFC North. Real quick before we leave, Joseph, did you base that on Aaron Rodgers not playing next year, or do you think the Vikings straight up take the division from Aaron Rodgers and the Packers?
I think they can win the division. I don't think the Lions are going to be relevant, and I think the Bears are probably going to struggle. And I just can see them coming out with Kirk Cousins in that offense.
All right. Well, there you go. That was the one I wanted to get in before the wire. So, gentlemen, successful episode, and I'll see you next week.
We'll see you guys.